Here we are in our World War II exhibit again, and in front of us is our magnificent F4U 7 Corsair. Our Corsair was built in 1945, delivered to the French as a -7 in 1953. It actually has some conflict history. It served in the Suez and a couple other regions for the French. After that, it came home. The U.S. Navy had possession of it. It went through a series of other museums, and eventually it met Hurricane Katrina in Mobile, Alabama. And when Hurricane Katrina came through the museum, it completely flattened this aircraft. There were 20-something aircraft in the building, and after the tidal surge had retreated, pretty much the other aircraft in the building had just crushed it flat. Different story today. If you look closely, you see the wingtip lights are on. If you pull on the propeller, there's compression. The engine wants to start. This aircraft is pretty much, it's almost a complete restoration. I'm not sure it would be ready to fly, but the World War II veterans that we had on duty when we got this aircraft in for display did a really professional job on it. All the switches in the cockpit are hooked up. All the circuit breakers go to the switches and boxes they're supposed to. So the -7 was a unique variant used by the French. It's easy to tell this is one of those because it has 2 antenna posts behind the cockpit. That's the recognition feature for that. But otherwise, we've painted this up to represent a local hero, Jerry Coleman. He was the voice of the Padres for many years, but before that, he was a Yankee. And when World War II started, he set down his bat and he went to war. He was a Dauntless pilot for 3 years. And when World War II ended, he went back to being a baseball player. And he stayed in that role until 1950 when the Marines were back in combat, this time in Korea. And for the Korean War, Mr. Coleman got to fly aircraft that looked very similar to this. We actually painted ours to match the aircraft in his logbook. So the white 8 you see is actually the aircraft that Jerry Coleman flew in combat. We were very pleased that before he passed away, he came and visited the museum. And although at first he was alarmed, he had a bit of history with aircraft 8. Before he passed away, he was very gregarious. He'd bring a lot of guests in and say, "Here's my plane." So we know he appreciated it. I mentioned in one of the other clips that in fighter combat, the only statistic that truly matters is how many you lose and how many of the enemy you destroy. This aircraft is one of the highest of the war. This aircraft had an 11-to-1 victory ratio, and you'll notice there's bomb racks under it. Far more of these were used as fighter bombers than the Hellcat, although some were. So the majority of these that were in combat were actually dragging bombs around the sky, and yet they still had an 11-to-1 victory ratio. That's really incredible. You'll notice a design feature about the Corsair that makes it almost unique. The Stuka and a couple others have it. It has this inverted gull wing. Both of these aircraft, the Hellcat and the Corsair, have the same engine. So the engineering question was the same. How do we attach this engine to a fighter airplane? But the two companies went about it completely different. The design philosophy couldn't be more different. And the easiest way to tell that is the straight wings and the inverted gull wing of the Corsair. So on this one, the inverted gull wing is to give that gigantic prop a couple extra feet of clearance. Believe it or not, the Hellcat designers had the same engineering question and they came up with a different way. That's why these two aircraft that were designed for the same role look so completely different. So the motor in front of us, a lot of people talk about secret weapons during the war. And I'll tell you, it's not always about secret weapons. Sometimes it's just about coming up with an engineering fix. The R2800 is one of many different aircraft engines developed during the war. And this one was specifically designed to accept battle damage and keep running. There's anecdotal evidence of some aircraft returning to the ship where entire jugs, entire cylinders have been blown off of their 2800, and the rest of the motor is still functioning, giving out enough power to get them back to the ship. It's truly an incredible design. It's a double row 9-cylinder. It is a radial engine. It was used on several of our aircraft during the war, most notably the Hellcat, the Corsair, and the P-47. All three of these aircraft were built for power and a rugged ability to get back to base. And all three of them did an amazing job of that. So that's our F4U-7 Corsair.